radio crackled with urgency as United Flight 892 declared a mayday, but what happened next defied every rule of commercial aviation. Captain Lisa Harrison's voice remained steady as she reported dual-engine failure at 31,000 feet with 236 passengers on board. But the F-16 pilots providing escort couldn't believe what they were hearing over the emergency frequency. The way she handled the aircraft, the precision of her communications, the impossible maneuvers she was executing. It all sounded familiar, too familiar. And when Major Rodriguez keyed his radio and said, "Viper, is that you?" the silence that followed revealed a secret that had been hidden for 8 years. The commercial airline captain who was about to save 236 lives wasn't just another pilot. She was Commander Lisa Viper Harrison, former Top Gun instructor and one of the most legendary fighter pilots in Navy history. Welcome to those who left a trace. Before we dive into this incredible story of hidden expertise and aerial mastery, tell me in the comments, from which city in the world are you watching this video today? And if you believe that heroes come in all uniforms, including airline uniforms, hit that subscribe button. These stories reveal the warriors who never stopped flying, even after they changed aircraft. United Airlines Flight 892 departed Los Angeles International Airport at 2:35 p.m. on a clear Thursday afternoon in November, bound for Chicago O'Hare with 236 passengers and crew aboard. The Boeing 777-300ER was one of United's newest aircraft, equipped with state-of-the-art avionics and twin Pratt and Whitney engines that had logged thousands of hours of reliable service. Captain Lisa Harrison had been flying this route twice weekly for the past 8 years, ever since she transitioned from military service to commercial aviation. At 38, she was younger than most senior captains, but had accumulated over 12,000 flight hours through a combination of military and civilian experience that made her one of United's most trusted pilots. Her official airline file listed her as a former Navy pilot with previous military aviation experience, but the details were vague enough to suggest routine military transport rather than anything specialized. Her colleagues knew Lisa as professional, competent, and unflappable under pressure, qualities that made her popular with flight crews but didn't distinguish her from dozens of other experienced captains. What her colleagues didn't know was that Captain Lisa Viper Harrison had spent 15 years as one of the Navy's most elite fighter pilots, including 5 years as a Top Gun instructor at the Navy Fighter Weapons School, where she had trained the pilots who would go on to become the legends of naval aviation. Lisa's transition to commercial flying had been deliberate and carefully managed. After 15 years of flying the F-A, 18 Super Hornets in combat zones, and training the next generation of fighter pilots, she had chosen civilian aviation as a way to continue flying while stepping away from the high-stress environment of military operations. The transition had required her to retrain on commercial aircraft systems, learn civilian aviation regulations, and adapt to the teamwork-oriented culture of airline operations. But the fundamental skills of flying, situational awareness, aircraft control, emergency procedures, and decision-making under pressure had transferred seamlessly from military to civilian aviation. Lisa's first officer on Flight 892 was Michael Chun, a competent pilot with 6 years of commercial experience who had flown with Lisa dozens of times over the past 2 years. Michael respected Lisa's flying skills and calm demeanor, but he had no context for understanding that he was working alongside someone who had once been considered among the most skilled pilots in the world. The flight's first 2 hours proceeded normally. Lisa and Michael followed standard operating procedures, monitored weather conditions, and maintained routine communication with air traffic control as they climbed to their cruising altitude of 35,000 feet and settled into the long cross-country flight. But at 4:47 p.m., approximately 400 miles east of Denver, Flight 892 experienced what commercial pilots train for but hope never to encounter, a catastrophic emergency that would test every aspect of Lisa's aviation experience. The first indication of trouble was a subtle vibration through the aircraft that Lisa felt rather than heard. Her 15 years of military flying had taught her to recognize the difference between normal aircraft sounds and the subtle changes that indicated developing problems. "Mike, are you feeling that vibration?" Lisa asked, her voice carrying the kind of calm attention that suggested concern without panic. Michael checked his instruments. "I'm seeing a slight temperature rise on engine number 2, but everything else looks normal." Lisa was already scanning her engine monitoring displays when the situation escalated beyond a minor mechanical issue. At 4:48 p.m., the number 2 engine suffered what the accident investigation would later determine to be an uncontained turbine failure, a catastrophic event where engine components breach the engine casing and can damage critical aircraft systems. The explosion was felt throughout the aircraft as passengers saw flames and debris streaming from the right engine. Emergency chimes filled the cockpit as warning lights illuminated across the instrument panel, and Lisa found herself dealing with the kind of emergency that occurs in fewer than 1 in 10 million commercial flights. Engine fire, engine 2. Michael called out, following the emergency checklist procedures they had practiced in flight simulators. But as Lisa began executing the engine fire procedures, the situation became exponentially worse. The uncontained engine failure had severed hydraulic lines and damaged electrical systems that controlled critical flight surfaces. Within 90 seconds, Flight 892 had lost most of its normal flight controls and was flying on backup systems that provided minimal aircraft control authority. "Lisa, we're losing hydraulic pressure in all 3 systems," Michael reported, his voice tight with professional concern. "We've got limited flight control authority and we're descending." Lisa's hands moved across the controls with the kind of fluid precision that comes from thousands of hours of experience with emergency procedures, but she could feel that the aircraft was responding differently than any commercial pilot should expect. The Boeing 777 was flying more like a damaged fighter aircraft than a stable airliner, requiring constant control inputs to maintain even basic flight parameters. For the first time in 8 years, Lisa Harrison allowed Commander Lisa Viper Harrison to take complete control. "Mike, I need you to run the emergency checklist while I fly the aircraft. We're dealing with multiple systems failures, and this is going to require some unconventional flying." Lisa's voice carried a new authority that Michael had never heard before. Not the calm professionalism of an airline captain, but the command presence of someone who had made life-and-death decisions in much more challenging aircraft under much worse conditions. Lisa began flying Flight 892 using techniques that weren't taught in commercial aviation training. She was compensating for the damaged flight controls by using engine thrust, trim settings, and control inputs that require the kind of instinctive aircraft handling that comes from years of flying high-performance military aircraft in emergency situations. The Boeing 777 began responding to Lisa's control inputs in ways that defied normal commercial aviation procedures, but her 15 years of fighter pilot experience allowed her to maintain control flight even with severely degraded aircraft systems. Denver Center, United 892 Heavy, we have multiple emergencies. Lisa transmitted on emergency frequency. Dual engine failure, hydraulic failures, limited flight control authority. We need immediate vectors to the nearest suitable airport and emergency services standing by. The air traffic controller's response was immediate and professional. United 892, Denver Center, we copy your emergency. Turn left heading 090. Descend to flight level 240. Denver International is 180 miles northeast of your position. But Lisa was already calculating that Denver International might not be achievable with their current aircraft condition and rate of descent. She needed alternatives, and she needed them quickly. Denver Center, United 892, request vectors to Peterson Air Force Base. We may not be able to maintain altitude for Denver International. The controller paused. Commercial aircraft rarely requested military airfields unless the situation was extremely serious. United 892, Peterson Air Force Base is approved. Turn left heading 060. Descend to flight level 200. I'm declaring an emergency and notifying Peterson of your inbound. As Flight 892 began its emergency descent toward Peterson Air Force Base, Lisa's radio calls were being monitored by military pilots conducting training exercises in the same airspace. 2 F-16 fighters from the Colorado Air National Guard were diverted to provide visual reconnaissance of the commercial airliner's condition. Major Carlos Rodriguez and Captain Jennifer Walsh had been conducting routine training flights when they received orders to intercept and assess United Flight 892. Both pilots were experienced fighter pilots with multiple deployments, but they had never been called upon to assist a commercial aviation emergency. As the F-16s approached Flight 892, Major Rodriguez established radio contact with the airliner. United 892, this is Falcon 01. We're F-16s from the Colorado Air National Guard. We're going to provide visual assessment of your aircraft condition and escort you to Peterson. Lisa's response came back immediately, clear and professional. Falcon 01, United 892, thank you for the assistance. Be advised we have multiple systems failures and limited flight control authority. We're maintaining control flight, but aircraft handling is severely degraded. Major Rodriguez's position is F-16 alongside the Boeing 777 and began assessing the visible damage. What he saw was worse than he had expected. The number 2 engine was completely destroyed, with debris damage visible along the fuselage and wing surfaces. But what impressed Major Rodriguez more than the aircraft damage was how the commercial pilot was handling the emergency. The Boeing 777 was maintaining stable flight despite obvious control difficulties, and the pilot's radio communications were crisp, professional, and tactically sound. United 892, Falcon 01. I can see significant damage to your number 2 engine and right wing area. How is your aircraft handling? Lisa's response revealed capabilities that Major Rodriguez hadn't expected from a commercial pilot. Falcon 01, United 892, we're using differential thrust and unconventional control inputs to maintain flight path. Aircraft is flyable but requires continuous pilot input. We're planning a straight-in approach to Peterson with no missed approach capability. Major Rodriguez recognized the language and concepts that Lisa was using. She wasn't just describing her emergency in standard commercial aviation terms. She was using fighter pilot terminology and tactical thinking that suggested military training. More importantly, the way she was flying the damaged airliner looked familiar. The control techniques, the precise aircraft handling, the tactical approach to the emergency. Major Rodriguez had seen this kind of flying before, but only from the most experienced military pilots. United 892, your flying looks familiar. What's your military background? There was a pause before Lisa responded, and when she did, her voice carried a tone that Major Rodriguez recognized immediately. Falcon 01, let's focus on getting this aircraft on the ground safely. We can discuss backgrounds after we've saved 236 lives. Major Rodriguez keyed his radio with growing amazement. The voice, the attitude, the professional competence under extreme pressure. He knew exactly who he was talking to. Viper, is that you? The silence that followed lasted exactly 5 seconds, but it changed everything about the emergency response and revealed a secret that had been hidden for 8 years. Lisa's response to Major Rodriguez's recognition came after a pause that seemed to last forever, but was actually only 5 seconds. Falcon 01, this is United 892. Let's maintain professional communications until we're on the ground. But Major Rodriguez was already certain of what he'd discovered. The voice, the flying techniques, the tactical approach to the emergency. He was escorting Commander Lisa Viper Harrison, one of the most legendary Top Gun instructors in Navy history. Copy that, United 892. But just so you know, Falcon 01 graduated from your program in 2015. You taught me everything I know about flying. Lisa's response revealed that her cover was completely blown, but her priorities remained focused on the emergency at hand. Roger that, Falcon 01. Then you know, I don't leave aircraft on the ground unless they're supposed to be there. Let's get this done. Major Rodriguez smiled despite the seriousness of the situation. That was vintage Viper, focused on a mission, confident in her abilities, and absolutely determined to bring everyone home safely. Captain Walsh, flying as Rodriguez's wingman, had been listening to the radio exchanges with growing amazement. She keyed her radio to address her flight lead. Falcon 01, Falcon 02. Are you saying that commercial pilot is Commander Harrison? The Viper? From Top Gun. Rodriguez confirmed what was becoming obvious to anyone with military aviation background who was monitoring the emergency frequency. Falcon 02, that's affirmed. We're escorting the best pilot any of us has ever seen, flying a crippled airliner like it's a Hornet with battle damage. The recognition of Lisa's identity spread quickly through the military aviation community monitoring the emergency. Peterson Air Force Base scrambled additional resources, including rescue and firefighting equipment, while word spread through pilot networks that one of the most respected instructors in naval aviation history was bringing a damaged commercial airliner to an emergency landing. But Lisa remained focused entirely on the technical challenges of flying Flight 892 with severely damaged systems and degraded control authority. "Mike," she said to her first officer, "I need you to manage the passenger cabin and emergency services coordination while I fly the aircraft. This approach is going to require techniques that aren't in the commercial aviation playbook." Michael Chun had been flying with Lisa for 2 years, but he had never seen her demonstrate the kind of aircraft control authority that she was displaying during this emergency. She was flying the damaged Boeing 777 with precision that seemed impossible given the extent of the system's failures. "Lisa, how are you doing this? I've never seen anyone fly a commercial aircraft like this." Lisa's response was honest and direct. "Mike, I spent 15 years flying high-performance military aircraft in emergency situations. Today's just another day at the office, but with more passengers." As Flight 892 approached Peterson Air Force Base, Lisa began executing an approach that combined commercial aviation procedures with fighter pilot techniques. She was using engine thrust for directional control, exploiting ground effect for additional lift, and managing the aircraft's energy state with the kind of precision that comes from years of training at the most demanding levels of military aviation. Major Rodriguez, escorting from his F-16, watched Lisa's approach with professional admiration. "United 892, your approach looks textbook perfect. Rate of descent is stable. Alignment is spot on, and you're managing that damaged aircraft like it's fully operational." Lisa's response reflected the confidence that had made her one of the most respected Top Gun instructors in Navy history. "Falcon 01, we're going to make this look easy. Just like I taught you, smooth inputs, positive control, and never doubt your capabilities." The landing of United Flight 892 at Peterson Air Force Base was witnessed by hundreds of military personnel who had assembled to observe what many considered to be one of the most challenging emergency landings in commercial aviation history. Lisa touched down on the runway with precision that seemed impossible given the aircraft's condition. The Boeing 777 rolled out straight and true, coming to a stop without any additional systems failures or passenger injuries. As emergency vehicles surrounded the aircraft and passengers began evacuating through emergency slides, Lisa secured the cockpit and prepared to face the aftermath of an emergency that had revealed her carefully hidden military background. Major Rodriguez landed his F-16 and immediately requested permission to meet with the crew of United 892. When he approached Lisa on the flight line, his first words were exactly what she had expected. "Commander Harrison, that was the most impressive piece of flying I've ever witnessed. You saved 236 lives today using skills that only come from the highest levels of military training." Lisa smiled for the first time since the emergency had begun. "Major Rodriguez, thank you for the escort and the professional support. And please, it's Captain Harrison now. I've been flying commercially for 8 years. Rodriguez shook his head in amazement. "Captain Harrison, with all due respect, once Viper, always Viper. You just reminded everyone why you were the most feared instructor at Top Gun." Captain Walsh joined the conversation, equally impressed by what she had witnessed. "Captain Harrison, I graduated from the Fighter Weapons School 2 years after Major Rodriguez. Your reputation was legendary even then. Everyone wanted to fly with Viper because they knew they'd learn more in one flight than they would in a month with anyone else." Lisa appreciated the recognition, but she was already thinking about the complications that her revealed identity would create. "I appreciate the kind words, but I need to focus on the accident investigation and taking care of my passengers. This emergency is going to generate a lot of attention that I prefer to avoid." Major Rodriguez understood immediately. Military pilots who transitioned to civilian careers often preferred to keep their backgrounds private, both for personal reasons and to protect the operational security of their former units. "Captain Harrison, your secret is safe with us, but you should know that what you did today is going to be studied and admired by pilots for decades. You demonstrated capabilities that most of us can only aspire to achieve. The federal investigation of United Flight 892's emergency landing took 6 months and involved representatives from the FAA, NTSB, United Airlines, and Boeing. The investigation confirmed that the dual-engine failure and multiple systems damage should have made controlled flight impossible. But Captain Harrison's exceptional pilot skills had enabled a successful emergency landing that saved all 236 passengers and crew members. The final accident report praised Captain Harrison's extraordinary pilot skills and decision-making under extreme pressure, but made no mention of her military background or the fighter pilot techniques that had made the impossible landing possible. Lisa returned to flying commercial routes for United Airlines 6 weeks after the emergency, following extensive debriefing and recertification procedures. The airline's management was aware of her military background, but they agreed to maintain her privacy while recognizing her as one of their most capable pilots. But within the military aviation community, the story of United Flight 892 became legendary. The commercial airline captain who had saved 236 lives using Top Gun techniques was quietly celebrated as proof that the best military pilots never really retire. They just find new ways to serve. Lisa continued flying for United Airlines, maintaining the same professional competence and quiet demeanor that had characterized her civilian career. But now there was an additional layer to her service. The knowledge that when commercial aviation faced its greatest challenges, military training and experience could mean the difference between tragedy and triumph. 6 months after the emergency landing, Lisa received a call from Captain Janet Morrison, commanding officer of the Navy Fighter Weapons School at Naval Air Station Fallon. "Commander Harrison, this is Captain Morrison from Top Gun. I know you transitioned to civilian flying, but I wanted to personally thank you for demonstrating exactly what our training is designed to accomplish." Lisa was surprised by the call. "Captain Morrison, I appreciate the recognition, but I was just doing my job." "Commander, what you did on Flight 892 showed the entire aviation community that military pilot training produces capabilities that can save lives in any aircraft, under any circumstances. You become an inspiration to every pilot who's gone through our program." Captain Morrison paused before making her next statement. "Commander Harrison, I'd like to invite you to return to Top Gun as a guest instructor. Share your experience with the current class. Show them how military training applies to civilian aviation emergencies. Help us train the next generation of naval aviators to be ready for anything." Lisa considered the opportunity. "Captain Morrison, I'm honored by the invitation, but I have commitments to United Airlines and passengers who depend on commercial aviation." "Commander, this will be a temporary assignment. 2 weeks, guest instructor status. Sharing your experience with pilots who need to understand that their training extends far beyond military operations." Lisa realized that accepting the assignment would allow her to contribute to military aviation training while maintaining her civilian career. "Captain Morrison, I accept the assignment. It would be an honor to return to Top Gun." 2 months later, Lisa stood in front of a classroom full of Navy fighter pilots at the Navy Fighter Weapons School, wearing her United Airlines uniform and preparing to teach the most important lesson of her aviation career. "Gentlemen and ladies, you're here to become the best fighter pilots in the world. But someday, some of you may find yourselves in civilian careers, flying different aircraft, serving different missions. When that day comes, remember that the training you receive here isn't just about military aviation. It's about becoming the kind of pilot who can handle any aircraft in any emergency under any circumstances." Lisa clicked to the first slide of her presentation, which showed a photograph of United Flight 892 on final approach to Peterson Air Force Base. This is what military aviation training looks like when it's applied to save the lives of 236 civilian passengers. This is why we train to the highest standards, maintain the most demanding requirements, and never accept anything less than excellence. She looked around the classroom at the eager faces of the next generation of Navy fighter pilots. This is your future, not just as military aviators, but as pilots who will carry these skills and this dedication wherever your careers take you. The question isn't whether you'll face situations that test your training. The question is whether you'll be ready when those situations arise. Commander Lisa Viper Harrison had spent 15 years training Navy fighter pilots to be the best aviators in the world. Now she was training them to be the kind of people who would never stop serving, no matter what aircraft they flew or what uniform they wore. Because the best pilots, like the best warriors, never really retire. They just find new ways to protect the people who depend on them.